Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from the AirThings Masters Day 3. It's Nepomniachtchi versus Alexandra Kosteniuk and there are a lot of games and of course I can't cover all of them. You guys have been requesting me to show so many of them, but I'm only one person, so I have to choose very carefully. And here I chose this one for several reasons. One, as Nepo is currently leading the tournament, 7 full points ahead of Magnus Carlsen, and also as he is playing the King's Gambit in this game. And he made a chessable course on the King's Gambit. I have not seen the course, but I have seen an introduction to the course by Nepo himself. He says that it's a little bit of a rusty and dusty opening, maybe even a little bit dubious, but if you know what you're doing, it can be extremely dangerous, and he says that your opponents will pay a very costly price for underestimating the opening. So let's see how it works out in practice here. He's playing against Alexandra, who chooses a very, very sharp line against the King's Gambit. So here we have e4, e5, and f4. Nepo goes for the King's Gambit, and for those of you who have been following the Morphy saga, you know that we've covered the King's Gambit quite a lot, and that there are very different ways of playing against it. And usually in the old days, people just accepted the Gambit. But here, Alexandra goes for d5. This is the Folkbeer counter Gambit, and it's a very, very dangerous opening. So you have to know it if you play the King's Gambit. For example, just e captures on f4 is considered to be a much stronger move by the engines, but I play the King's Gambit quite a lot, and I always enjoy when people just capture it, even though it's the strongest continuation for black. But I hate it when someone plays the Folkbeer counter Gambit. I have not studied a lot. I know a few lines, that can help me in blitz games, but nothing serious. So here we have e captures on d5. This is the main line. You have to be very careful not to do something like f captures on e5, because then queen h4 check and it's game over. Black wins on the spot, because what do you do? If king to e2, we just pick up this pawn with check, and then you'll get checkmated very soon. Or if g3 captures with check, you blunder a rook. So of course, after d5, we have to play e captures on d5, and now the original idea that Folkbeer had when he came up with this is that black just wants to advance the pawn to e4 and take away this very natural f3 square from the white knight, and then it's a really, really crazy game. Paul Morphy achieved some brilliant victories with black in this particular line, it's still deadly even to this date. But here Alexandra goes for e captures on f4. It's people play both e4 and e captures on f4, so it's a great idea to see what Nepo has prepared. So knight f3, knight to f6, and now bishop to b5 check. Bishop to c4 is also very, very much playable, but one thing you don't want to do is maybe c4. This does look like you're defending your d5 pawn, but this never really ends well for white. Just to give you an example, let's say c6, we challenge white's strong center, and now if d captures on c6, knight captures because you kind of want to keep your pawn. Let's say d4, now we're going to play bishop to b4 check. And after knight to c3, even bishop to g4. And now look at this position. Black has all of this development, and he didn't really, or rather in this case, she didn't really work all that much for it. So black would be very, very happy with this. And not to mention, if you continue with d5 and abandon your development, even castles, you can even sacrifice a knight here, captures, and now queen b6. And now look at this. This rook coming to d8, this rook coming to e8, and it's gonna be very, very hard, maybe even impossible to withstand all of this pressure. Good luck castling that white king. So while it is possible to play c4, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, maybe just don't do it. So bishop b5 check. We have c6, d captures on c6, knight captures on c6, and now knight to c3. We have bishop to d6, and now not castling, but first queen to e2 with check, checking to see if maybe Alexandra wants to go queen to e7 and maybe trade queens, or will we see something else? So here we have bishop to e6 and now knight to d4. Very aggressive, going after the knight here. It's attacked twice, but also going after the bishop on e6. The bishop is also attacked twice. And while you could just play queen to d7 and add another defender to both the knight and the bishop, Alexandra just castles here, and this is where things get very, very interesting. So Nepo goes for knight captures on e6, even though it could be a little bit dangerous. You can see that Nepo still hasn't castled his king on move 10, which is very odd in the King's Gambit. It's not odd in the King's Gambit to have your king on f1 or on f2, maybe even g2 or you know, wherever, but it's a little bit weird to have it on e1 square on move 10. And also, white still didn't play d4, so you usually want to play d4 and recapture here on f4, but now this is the position. And now what can Alexandra play? The queen is hanging, the rook is hanging. Well, queen to a5. Really exotic stuff here, putting pressure on the bishop, preparing rook rook a to e8 as the queen and king are still on the same file. So here we have knight captures on g7. If you go for knight captures on f8, then the other rook just goes here and we pick up the queen. So here Nepo first plays knight captures on g7, keeps an eye on this square, and now we have king captures on g7. You could also just attack the queen instead with, for example, rook f to e8, and then we see the line knight captures rook, captures queen, captures knight, captures. White has to give up the queen, but the compensation is definitely there. For example, bishop captures b, captures white castles kingside, and we get this position where should be roughly equal, but Nepo would have two rooks for a queen, and also he is up a pawn. So two rooks for the queen, he is up a pawn, and his pawn structure is much better. He has two pawn islands with nothing ruined, whereas Alexandra would have four pawn islands, and not just that, also a doubled f pawn. So if anyone is to be preferred here is white, but you know, it's hard to make an assessment here. So here after knight captures on g7, Alexandra first goes for king captures on g7, now preparing rook a to e8, and now bishop captures on c6, making another capture, ruining black's pawn structure while keeping an eye on the e8 square. But now you really have to play rook f to e8 or rook a to e8. You have to place a rook here and well, just give up the rooks for the queen, and that's it. Play this position, knight captures. We're gonna castle kingside, and again, it's the exact same position that we discussed, only the exact same position. So here after b captures on c6, Alexandra did not go for rook a to e8 or rook f to e8. She played b captures on c6, but now it's a little bit different. Now Nepo just castles kingside, and now you have this position where it's similar to what we discussed, regarding the pawn structure. However, the queens are still on the board, and black has both rooks. But the problem is, look at the position of the black king. It's just not all that safe, and it's not easy to attack the white king. Here we have rook a to e8 attacking the king. Now comes queen to f3, and now this is a weak pawn, this is a weak pawn, this is a weak pawn, this is a weak king. How do you play here? Knight to h5, and now comes d4. Finally, Nepo executes this d4 move, but okay, you will not be capturing on f4. The bishop and knight are covering that. We have queen to f5 now, bringing the queen where the action is, and now there are many ways for Nepo to play this, but he goes for the absolute simplest idea, g4. And you have to be careful when playing a move like this, because if it doesn't win you the game, then you will maybe have overexposed your king. But here, it of course works. So how do you defend? Queen g6, we pin the pawn. King to h1, maybe king to h1 could have been played a little bit sooner, so you don't have to worry about it in the future, but you know, this also works. Knight to f6, attacking the g4 pawn, but now just bishop captures on f4. We have bishop captures, queen captures, and now what do you play? Well, it's a really bad position for black. The absolute best idea would be something like knight to d5, attacking the queen and the knight. And if we have a trade here, then white just plays c3, and look at this position. White is up 2 pawns. Black has really nothing to show for the pawn. Even if you go for something like rook to e4 and win this pawn, it's just not enough. Queen f3, we're gonna pick up this pawn. And if rook captures on g4, it even loses by a tactic, rook to g1. Now black has no moves. If you capture here, we capture here, and then black loses the queen. Or if you defend h3, we force black to capture, and then we pick up the queen. Or if black doesn't capture on g1, we can simply pick up the rook on g4. But Alexandra played knight captures on g4, and here Nepo just played h3, and it was in this position on move 20 that Alexandra Kosteniuk resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So very exciting game. 20 moves, King's Gambit in 2022, very nicely done. As Nepo said, it might be rusty and dusty and a little bit dubious, but if your opponent doesn't know all the secrets and all the poisons that the position holds, it could get very, very dangerous. So Alexandra did everything perfectly well, but at that point she had to capture the queen. She had to give up the rooks for the queen, and then it would be okay, probably still better for white, but definitely playable. I mean, you have the queen, you have a game. So they say, but this way it didn't work. So now the knight is attacked. There's no way to play it. If you move the knight, then of course the rook is coming to g1. This is game over. And even if you try some tricks like h5, maybe trying to open up the h file, it doesn't really matter. For example, captures. There's just not enough time for black to make use of this. We can even play king g1, and well, black is just too slow. White will just bring the rook into the game, and well, it will be easily winning. So of course after h3 she resigned, and a very nice victory for Nepo, who is currently leading the tournament in none other than the King's Gambit. And as we haven't shown the standings yet, these are the standings after the first 3 days. So today is the final day of the preliminaries. We will have 3 more games. Nepo leading the tournament with 27 points, so 7 points ahead of there's a 3-way tie ahead of Magnus Carlsen, Vladislav Artemiev, and Vincent Keimer. Then with 19 points, Anish Giri and Eric Hansen. With 18 points, we have Nodirbek Abdusatorov, Andrei Sipenko, and Ding Liren. With 17 points, Levon Aronyan. With 15, we have Lekwang Liam and Pragyananda. With 12, we have Yang Shishov Duda. With 11, Hans Mokeniman and Shakra Mamedyarov. And with 0 points so far, Alexandra Kosteniuk. But as she said on her Twitter profile, that's not a problem. If anything, that's only experience that will make future events much better and easier. So yeah. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Kimura, Doug Reynolds, Ivan Sterling, Pipi Pupu, and Richard Schwartz for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and remember to always play the King's Gambit, unless you have a chance to play the Evans Gambit. But otherwise, the King's Gambit is perfectly fine. See you soon.